Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Capital Connection. I'm Conan Smith, the president and CEO of the Michigan Environmental Council. We're going to talk about a long-standing environmental dream today with two people who have been helping us over a long period of time to achieve that dream of getting excellent regional transit in the Southeast Michigan area. Joined by longtime MEC friend, Paul Hillegonds. Paul is a former speaker of the Michigan House of Representatives, a nonprofit leader at Detroit Renaissance and the Michigan Health Endowment Fund, and he served as the first board chair for the Regional Transit Authority when it was created more than a decade ago, I believe. Is that right, Paul?
That's right. It's time passes quickly.
I'm so excited, Paul, to have the opportunity to do retrospective with you. Paul retired earlier this year officially, and I'm confident it's going to be a retirement just like my mother's, full of activity, both grandparenting and being swept into the next big things. Is that true, Paul? Is that how it's shaping up?
I'm still engaged with nonprofit work on a volunteer basis, yes, and I'm enjoying being active.
And Julia Roberts, who is relatively new on the staff at the Regional Transit Authority, which has been staffing up, but she's a long-term transit activist and professional coming to the RTA from the Ann Arbor Area Transit Authority, the RIDE. Julia, what's it like? How's the energy on the new team at the RTA?
It's really great, Conan. We have a fantastic team. We just doubled in size in the last month. So we're really gearing up, I think, for what's to come and doing some community engagement. I'm happy to be here with Paul and having served with him through my previous agency in the past of the RTA too.
I would like to offer to you, Julia, the sidebar opportunity off this show if you need to get any intel on Ben Stupka or Melanie Piana, your colleagues over there. I've got a lot of dirt on both of them, and I would be very happy to give you leverage with that team.
Thanks, Conan. I appreciate any offers.
Ben Stupka is an alumni from the Michigan Environmental Council, and Melanie Piana and I worked together at Metro Matters prior to my joining the Environmental Council, and she was at one point the president of the Michigan Municipal League. So you got real extraordinarily talented team over there, full of great people, and I'm excited to talk today about what's going to happen. Before we get into that, Paul, could I just ask you to help us get a little bit of a retrospective on public transportation in Southeast Michigan? We worked for 40 years to get a transit authority established legislatively. I know that when you were Speaker of the House, that was an issue that came across the desk multiple times. I think we failed to do it some 20 some odd times. It's been a long-standing priority for the region, but a hard one to achieve. Can you talk a little bit about that path to getting the institution that you ultimately chaired?
Well, it has been a long, frustrating journey for sure. It really, there have been so many generations of organization on regional transit. I know back before I was elected to the legislature in '78, back in '74, there was a battle between Detroit and a 7-county SEMTA region over funding, how you allocate the funding. Detroit opted to create DDOT and have more control over transit in the city. And ultimately, SEMTA went from 7 counties to 3 counties. And thus SMART, which is the suburban system today, was created. I was at Detroit Renaissance when there was an effort to change the governance in the region. DARTA was the name of the effort. And DARTA actually made it to the governor's desk, but in one of his last acts as governor, Governor John Engler vetoed DARTA. So yet another failed attempt to bring the leadership in the region more to governance, and with the goal of doing more coordination and even consolidation of some of the operations in the three-county region. Then comes 2012 and Governor Snyder, who was very supportive of the effort with the U.S. Department of Transportation to build the Q line, or then it was called M1 Rail. And the administration at that time in Washington said, we will consider funding M1 Rail, but you need a truly regional transit authority enacted into law before we consider making that capital investment. 2012, it happened. It was a circuitous political route, but it was created. And it's a 4-county region today, the RTA. It's mainly done planning. It's done a number of pilot projects, which I'm sure Julia will want to describe, and is working towards coordination with the power it has to be the allocator of federal funds and state funds for transit in the 4-county region. It's a complicated governance structure. 4 counties have 2 representatives each, 3 appointed by county execs, 1 by the county commission, Washtenaw County. The city of Detroit has 1 representative appointed by the mayor. And then the chair of the board is to be appointed by the governor, and I served in that role for 10 years. Now the chair is Dave Masseron, who will do a terrific job. But that's the makeup. In order to get funding on the ballot to fund the operations of the 4-county region, in addition to what the DDOT through its general fund and what SMART and the Ann Arbor Area Transit Authority, the RIDE fund through millage, you need 7 of 9 votes. You need a consensus of the appointed board of RTA to put anything on the ballot. And thus it's been a hard challenge to get additional funding, and we'll get into that. But that's where we stand today with the RTA 4-county region, 10 appointed board members, and a growing terrific staff. That's been one of the good news aspects of RTA. With the federal COVID dollars, with the infrastructure dollars, we finally have the capacity to have a top quality staff that will advance the mission of RTA.
I remember I was on the Washtenaw Board of Commissioners when RTA launched, and part of the negotiations around the makeup of that board of directors. And while I know it has created challenges for you as the chair that governance structure has, as we were creating it, I have to say, I was truly delighted and really somewhat inspired by the county executives and the mayor, who envisioned a balanced and equitable board that was oriented towards the professional delivery of transit services, to the point where a small county like Washtenaw was going to be given equal say on that board, which I thought was really generous. Like, I think if the mayor of Detroit and the county execs in Oakland and Macomb had felt differently, it wouldn't have happened. It was a very promising step. Like, the regional leadership saw regional opportunity for regional solutions. And
yeah, yes, indeed. And I'll just say the execs, the mayor, have really over time appointed board members who want to work together. And you know, one of the great achievements of RTA over the 10 years is that it really put to bed finally the long battle over how you allocate federal dollars between SMART and DDOT, Ann Arbor Area Transit Authorities in a different region. But that's always been a long battle. Do you allocate on the basis of miles covered and driven by transit, or by the population served? And that was a division that ultimately blew up the opportunity to get funding for a subway or bus rapid transit in the region back in the early 80s. Finally, that is a non-issue for the RTA board. Every year, without much debate, it's divided up 50-50.
Julia, one of the things that was most intriguing and exciting to me about the original ballot proposal for the RTA was the inclusion of millions of dollars for technological innovation in transportation. You are the planning and innovation director for the RTA. It's an exciting space, right? Like we don't have to just think of traditional bus service, although that's a critical component. We have all this emerging technology that ought to propel the region to be a mobility leader. It's got to be a great role to play in a great region. Can you share a little bit of your journey to the RTA, like how you got to where you are today?
Yes, I couldn't agree more, Conan. I'd be happy to. Thank you. It is a really exhilarating space to be in, and I think one of the fun parts of it is you get to learn new things all the time, but also sometimes the.
Oh no,
We lost her.
So, folks, as you can imagine, it's August, and both Paul and Julia are basking in the glow of summer and family. Paul's on the west side of the state. Where actually you're back home. You live there now, so.
Yes, we followed our grandchildren who moved with their parents, our kids, to Holland a couple of years ago, and we have granddaughters 4 and 1, and it's such a joy to be near them.
And Julia's in Indiana with her family as well. So Julia, sorry we lost you there. You were saying about your journey into the transit authority.
Yeah.
Oh man, this is going to be a tough one for us. Paul, let me pivot back to you then. So we've got this great board and some innovative staff and a really strong plan. But there have been challenges, right? It was tough to get that ballot question on the ballot the first time. The proposal lost by just a hair, less than a percent, and we've struggled to get another millage proposal back on the ballot. Can you talk a little bit about the regional tensions that exist? I know there's a lot of collaboration, but there isn't always consensus.
Well, I think the 2016 vote, which was 50.5 to 49.5, and it was a $4.7 billion proposal that would have been expanded transit significantly in the region, but needs to be expanded. When you look at our per capita support for transit in the 4-county region, we're at about a third of the average support in other major metro areas. One reason I think it failed was the concern, honestly, of the operators, our transit operators. Was this going to be another layer of operation? And that was never the intention. We are a funding mechanism and a planning mechanism, but we want to support the better coordinated service that our operators are providing. It's going to be up to the regional operators to decide how much they want to consolidate, but we can be a driving force in coordinating. I believe the vote showed that there is a desire for more reliable transit, and it goes to figure because we have a great number of Detroit residents who don't own their own vehicles, who work in the suburbs and need reliable transit. And then we have more employees in Detroit who live in the suburbs than live in the city, who commute in. And all you need to do is drive the congested roads into our cities, including into Ann Arbor. And more reliable transit, taking more autos off the road, would be a good thing. So there is that desire. There is always the underlying issue of how do you allocate dollars between the region, and how do we fund our transit? We are very limited in the state to how we fund transit. The RTA has the authority to ask voters to support vehicle registration fee increases, but mainly millage. And millage brings out the battle between wealthier suburbs with lower millage rates and high millage in the city, a lower tax base. And how do you equitably provide value for that millage. Most regions that have built funding support for the operation of their transit have a regional sales tax or a different kind of tool to fund transit. We don't have that in the state, and I think it's an underlying problem that we have in going forward with a tax proposal.
One of the other major conversations that's happened has been about the actual footprint of the transit authority itself. There are in each of the counties represented in the system, very rural areas, Western Washtenaw, Northern Macomb, Northern Oakland, for example, where the car dependency is very high and car ownership rates are very high. And so there's been, I think, a reluctance from those communities to envision transit as part of their own mobility future. There's been discussion at the legislature about restructuring the RTA to allow those counties to shrink the footprint to the areas that are more oriented around modern transportation, transit, and mobility. How is that conversation being received at the regional level and on the board?
I would defer to Julia. There was support maybe 4 years ago by our regional leaders to look at a legislative change, maybe governance, maybe footprint. There was some at least discussion of it. The legislature at the time wasn't interested, but it's a different legislature today. And, I think there should be at least discussions with the regional leaders and legislators about, is there a different way to configure RTA that would make support more likely? Having said that, you always, when you lose by 1%, as we did in 2016, you think, would you have done things differently? I think in our master planning, we did talk about having park and rides and making fixed line transit, more convenient transit available to the outer ring suburbs. I wish we had advertised that more because I do think when you look at the congestion from the outer ring suburbs into the city or across the region from suburb to suburb, there really is an argument to be made in the outer ring areas for improving transit access, but it may be a combination of access with vehicles, personal vehicles, and fixed line service.
So, Paul, when you think about the coalitions that need to come together and have needed to, I've been very impressed with the sort of historical leadership of the business community, which I think surprises people given Detroit as the motor city. That there was some idea that the autos would oppose the implementation of a transit system. But in fact, we've seen very good positive leadership from the business community and strong support from the nonprofit community, especially social service providers, planners, environmentalists, that sort of thing. Do you think that coalition is broad enough, strong enough to support another attempt at a millage, or do we need to do more in that space?
I think there is interest in the business community. For supporting a millage, we need to prove to the business community that we have coalition partners, strong grassroots support from organizations like MEC. True has been around for a long time, but we need to build our citizen support. And business will be there. They were a major funder of the last campaign, and there's a reason for that. I go back when I was really interested in the role of transit in the region with Detroit Renaissance. Richard Florida wrote his book, The Creative Class. Talent is attracting economic development, and young talent today isn't as dependent on personal vehicles and wants a convenient, reliable transit system to get around in cities, because talent is increasingly attractive to vibrant urban areas. We lose to other metro areas that have much better transit, and thus we lose on economic development. And so business is very interested in transit, I believe.
I remember a report from CEOs for cities that showed that a dollar investment in your urban core also resulted in $1.25 growth in the regional area, and that like really thinking intelligently about the economic engine can benefit everyone, and transit should be a part of that. Mobility needs to be a part of that, especially when you think about in the downtown, like Detroit's downtown footprint itself has so much parking that could be put to maybe better economic use.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That, Julia, that gets into your planning. I know one of our requirements at RTA was to update planning every year, and I'm sure you're working on some of this to make funding potentially more attractive, both funding, capital funding the federal and state governments provide, but also ultimately we hope more operating support.
Yes, and that's something we're actually in the midst of working towards at the moment, updating our annual regional transit master plan. We should have some community engagement on that coming up later this month, as early as maybe next weekend, and into the following month to prepare for if there's an opportunity for future funding beyond the existing grants that we're receiving in the coming year or 2 to 3 years. We want to be ready, and we want to give people an opportunity to hear their voice and kind of your say for the RTA. One of the things that I saw coming from, I think, AATA to the executive director at WAVE as a smaller rural and small urban transportation agency, or what I call urban, is that we need both. We need that flexible transit, and we also need the fixed route transit. So things like simultaneously applying for reconnecting communities and neighborhoods at the federal and state level for possible BRT project development. We're really hitting the ground running, and I think that that's something that I hope to see us continue with. Even the collaborations we're doing with providers and other smaller agencies as well. No agency is too small to help us with connecting our fares and other technologies, from the payment side to the bus stops. So that's where people really connect with transit. So we want to meet people at the transit centers. We want to meet people at their local fairs. We're doing our best with a small, tight team to really work to reach out to people and hear those comments from folks on what's changed. We've been through a pandemic, and we really want to see, we may think we know how that has impacted people, but everybody has their own story, and we want to have that incorporated so that we can fund it for the future.
Julia, there's a question from the audience about the potential of expanding the queue line up Woodward into the suburbs. That's been a long conversation about connectivity between city and suburb using fixed route transit. Originally, M1 Rail was, I think, envisioned almost as a demonstration that we could be an innovative and progressive region, but now we've got it. What's the dialogue around these major corridors, Woodward, Gratiot, Michigan Ave, and the potential for fixed route service?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we are looking to sustain the existing services that we have, but also build to expand with, that's the beauty of pilots, is we can try out new things like bus rapid transit to see, how can we increase demand, and then maybe further things. Different solutions can fit different spaces. And so it doesn't have to be rail for every space, but we need to have something and ways for people to connect to those fixed route corridors as well, through microtransit, through even non-motorized transportation, pedestrian, bike, and other, e-scooter type infrastructure. One of the projects that we're looking at for next year is called an Access to Transit program that will really look at that hub connectivity point between how people get on buses or other forms of public transportation and how they get to those. We think of sometimes in our transit hats, we forget that people have to get to the bus. And so that is just as important as being on the bus or whatever mode that you're taking.
we have a couple of our member organizations at the Environmental Council who are passionate about this and are participating in the audience today. Megan Owens from Transit Riders United, Transportation Riders United, and Todd Scott, the bicyclist. They, I know, are very concerned about that first mile, last mile concern. And there's a lot of energy in Metro Detroit around that, particularly with greenways, non-motorized connections. I see that as part of the innovation portion of the work that RTA does. Do you anticipate funding for trails and non-motorized connectivity to those places as part of the future plan and future millage?
I think that the Access to Transit program is a great start. It'll identify at least, one principal hub in potentially each of our 4 counties for the region. And then we want to build on there. We don't want us to just be kind of a one and done. And certainly any potential future funding that we receive, even beyond the American Rescue Plan, could go to extend that. We have to work with our partners and other transportation agencies, whether it's roads or parks and recreation, to make sure that we're being sensitive to the environments that we're connecting with. And some of that is, our purview goes so far, but we don't have to sit here and stop there. I think we can work with our partners to make sure that's part of our coordination. Beyond just planning, we also are trying to accelerate these innovations. We're trying to make sure that there's funding for them. And we may not be able to fund them all at once, but we want to try and make that happen as quickly as possible.
Can I ask you, Julia, to put your dreamer hat on for a minute and tell us, like, if there is a far-sighted vision or service that you would love to see the RTA like on the forefront of or leading the nation on? Is there something that speaks to your heart? Like, we should be, this is the star I want us to reach for?
Yeah, I think there's not just one, but I can name maybe one of the ones that are really top of mind, or maybe a couple. It's hard to choose. I think it goes from everything from a better workforce development program so that we have a sustainable workforce to operate the services that we want to see in the future, to, it can be autonomous and electric vehicles that help us to take us forward, so that, I don't see autonomy as something that it's kind of like cruise control on steroids. We're still going to need operators. We're still going to need people to kind of like the queue line conductors, where that safety is paramount. That doesn't mean that we can't advance as a region and be the lead. In fact, at the same time that we're doing this presentation, CAR is doing kind of a future of mobility and electrification today at the Book Depository new lab center. And I think seeing all of these conversations happening is really encouraging into where we can go moving forward.
Paul, I want to take a moment just to say thank you for years of dedicated regional leadership. I'm so in love with the RTA and what it's been able to do. And a huge part of that has been your leadership and the humanity that you brought to that role. There was so much tension and so much, I think, a lot of trepidation that we would just break down into traditional regional fights, and we could not have had a better first chair to help us navigate that space. You're leaving a huge legacy in Southeast Michigan.
You're very kind, Conan. Thank you. It really was a privilege to serve, and there's the frustration that we didn't win in 2016, but with the staff we have, just listening to Julia and the plans for reaching out to our citizens, I believe that support for transit will grow, and a better understanding of RTA's role. And we're not there to create another layer of operation. We're there to support our operators in better coordinated service, more flexible mobility, last mile service. Thank you for mentioning that, Julia. We have to do this. My passion for this was we will not succeed as a region if we don't fix our transit system ultimately. And that's going to require more resources. Just a reminder to everyone, if we're going to compete as other metro areas have for much better transit service, whether it be subway or rail or bus rapid transit, if we're going to compete for the capital dollars, the federal government's going to say to us, show us your regional support. Show us how you're working together and are willing to fund the operations of the systems you want us to fund. And I believe we'll get there. It's taking more time than we'd all like, but with the support of MEC, other grassroots organizations, business working together, reminding our regional leaders how important transit is to the success they're trying to achieve economically, socially, with equity issues and economic development issues both. I think we'll get there.
Seriously, Paul, we couldn't have done it as well without you, and we're just trying to build on your legacy. I know for myself and all of the staff and board, I know Ben would have liked to be here today. He's on his first day of PTO, and I don't know how long. We just want to say thank you, and we're really excited for what's to come.
Thank you. Thank you, Julia.
Paul, Julia, we're at the hour. I want to say thanks to both of you for taking time to chat. Julia, we will almost certainly have RTA team back, maybe with some of our member organizations as the planning process progresses. And Paul, again, so much gratitude to you for that Southeast Michigan leadership. I know you're going to be around and active, and you can trust that MEC is going to do everything we can to keep our hooks in you. So
I'm not going away, Conan. I'm going to continue supporting RTA and your work in support of RTA. Thank you.
Now that I know that you're back on the west side, you know, we have this critical dunes issue that we'd love to get you involved in.
That brings back memories too. Yeah.
Both of you, thanks so much. Everyone in the audience, it's been great to have you. As always, if you posted a question that we didn't get to today, Bo Brockett on our team will follow up. And in the follow-up email to this, you'll be provided a link to the video of this webinar as well. It's been great to have everybody here working with us again. Paul, Julia, thanks for your time. Members of the audience, thanks for taking a little time out of your morning to be with us as well. And we'll see you all next time on Capital Connection.
Take care. You too.
Thank you, Conan.
Bye now.